Hey, welcome to the show. I'm Yossi Goslin, NBA salary cap analyst, and this is Team 22 of 30 of my offseason preview. This time we're going to be discussing the Orlando Magic. Make sure you guys are following me on Twitter and Blue Sky. Best time of year to follow me. I'm going to be reacting to all sorts of transactions as they happen. Make sure you're subscribed to me on YouTube, Spotify, and Apple so you can watch all my previous stuff, get alerts whenever I got more content coming out, and subscribe to Third Apron, my newsletter. At some point, I will probably go deeper into the salary cap minutia of what the Magic might have planned this offseason. So joining me to discuss today, he is one of the best guys covering the Magic. You can see him cover the Magic consistently on the Orlando Sentinel, Jason Beede. Jason, thanks for joining, and how's it going?
Things are going well. I'm happy to be here, and so far so good off season. Been watching the playoffs. It's been exciting. It's been really fun to watch the playoffs this year. I feel like there's been some really good battles, so things are going well.
Yeah, absolutely. This season, this playoff, hard to I don't think I've been this excited for the playoffs since the bubble. And part of that is just the pent up energy from not being able to do much at all in life during that time, but also I think that was just some really good high level quality basketball at the same time. So just like a good combination. So yeah, Orlando Magic offseason. So they're they're no longer rebuilding. They've been somewhere in between a rebuild and competitiveness now for the past two seasons now. Probably the most efficient rebuild I've seen in the past few years, where like everything they did kind of just stemmed from one trade. Like just that Vucevic trade in the 2021 trade deadline really like that got them a lot of assets, got them the pick for Wagner, and then they ended up being able to be low enough in the standings to get Jalen Suggs in the draft, and fortunate enough to win the lottery the next year. So like very just like efficient, like they just picked the right exact time to move to make those to enter that rebuild, and pretty quick turnaround considering this was just 4 years ago. So last year won six fewer games than the previous season. Most of it chalked up due to injuries, mainly Jalen Suggs. They really started to tail off once he got hurt. Still, though, remained pretty like their net rating only fell a little bit. They still remain the top tier defense, and their offense slipped a bit. They kind of got to like the bottom tier. But at the same time, you could when you watch this team, you could still tell that even when they're all healthy, they could still use some more offensive firepower, like some more shooting, another shot creator, another play creator. And there's going to be some like an interesting tug and pull for how the Magic do that while trying to retain their defensive identity. But it feels like they've kind of maxed out on internal improvement, other than like their top guys reaching additional levels. But I think they're going to need to get some scoring elsewhere. I'm not sure they're going to really get that from their guys internally. And management, Weltman went on record even saying, yeah, that's something we need to address this offseason. But this is a team that has been like mostly like one of the more inactive ones when it comes to like free agency in the trade market, mostly because they've, and rightly so, been counting on focusing on the draft, getting their guys, developing them, and it's paid off. So I mean, so I guess I'm not like skeptical, I guess, because like it's like yeah, they said they're gonna address it, but like at the same time, I'm looking at their history, so how aggressive they'll be, I don't know. I mean, so what do you think? Like, do you think the changes are coming, and like, what do you have an idea like what degree they might address them?
Yeah, I think it's fair to be a little questionable of it based on history. I mean, look, they haven't made a trade the past two deadlines. And they said all the right stuff. Like Jeff Waltman said all the right things. Jamal Mosley backed that up. Paolo Banchero backed that up. All the the key guys said the right things. And to your point, it's just a matter of what do they feel like they need to do without diminishing too far their defensive identity. I mean, they know they have to give up some defense to get some offense. Their offensive rating was bottom five. Their scoring was bottom five. I mean, offense was hard to come by. Like really challenging sometimes. And to your point, Jalen Suggs, Paolo Banchero, and Franz Wagner only played 6 games together this season, and they still won 41 games. So it feels as though, you know, they've stuck with roster continuity for the most part the past couple of years, and it's been a key strength, right? They haven't had to figure things out too much, and when they did have guys go down with injury, there were some rough patches, obviously, but because they knew everybody, there wasn't a whole lot to figure out in terms of roster spots and whatnot. They were able to stay afloat, and once Paolo and Franz came back, Jalen only played like 1 game after January 5th or something like that. Jalen didn't return. They lost Mo Wagner in the middle of the season. But once Paolo and Franz returned, they made the playoffs. They won the playing game. They were the 7th seed. They lost to Boston, obviously. But it feels as though like they're really close to being really dangerous because I wrote so many different times in so many different ways. The Magic, you know, don't even need to shoot league average from three. Just a little bit better. It was pretty remarkable to see how well they'd win, how well they do, and find just enough points to score and find success. And if they did shoot league average, I'm not talking above league average. I'm literally just talking league average from three. They had a really good record. I don't have that in front of me, but I've written it a number of different ways, talking about just if they just get a little bit more offense, this team can be really dangerous because you mentioned it, internal development. I don't think people realize how young Paolo, Franz, and Jalen are. Now, they're getting expensive in the near future. I'm sure we'll dive into that. Ben Kerr was up for a rookie extension this summer. Franz got his, and Jalen got his as well. But they're still really young. They're still multiple years away from being in their own respective primes. And that doesn't mean you just wait for that to happen. Obviously, you want to take advantage of their contracts. As I said before, they're getting a bit more expensive, but yeah, it seems as though like they're saying all the right things. Now it's just a matter of what in their minds do they view as, how far do they need to go, how far do they need to take it, and what are they willing to part with? Because they have a ton of draft capital. They have movable contracts. They have young prospects. They have young players. So all the pieces are there, and that's part of it is Jeff Weltman didn't make a move the past 2 years. If when they signed multiple guys to extensions last summer, not just Franz and Jalen, but Gogo Bataz, got a new contract. Mo Wagner, they brought back Gary Harris. They renegotiated and extended Jonathan Isaac. They gave Wendell Carter an extension. Like what they did last offseason really set up this offseason where now you have 11 guys under contract and 4 more with team options. So, hypothetically, you have all 15 under contract. They're not going to bring back all 15 because they'd be a second apron team with the money. But, because they've waited their time, because they've relied on continuity, because they've relied on internal development, they're now in this really good position, of making a move. It's just a matter of making the right move because the wrong move can be damaging, as we've seen, not just with this, other teams, but this team specifically. You go back years to the previous regime and whatnot, and where things really fell south. So, knowing Jeff Weltman, he's not gonna, go too crazy, right? But at the same time, they know and they've admitted they need offensive improvement badly, and they talked about that quite a bit on the record, which I think is the fact that they're able to show their flaws and talk about it openly and say this is the time, and now they're ready to view this team and this stage of their building. I wouldn't call it rebuilding, just continuing building their roster. They're going to view it in a win now lens, and whatever that means is up to them. But it would be like I would expect a move or two potentially, just based on what they said. That's not insider information, just based on what they said. They're ready to make a move, and now it's just to see what it is.
So we'll touch on the finances a little later because yes, as the roster gets more expensive, that is going to influence who they might go after. But I do want to just touch on that point about making the right move because we saw them pursue Contavious Caldwell Pope, which in theory I like the theory of it, where you already have Franz, you already have Paolo, you already have Suggs, your 1, 2, and 3 options. So KCP proved that he can be an excellent fourth or fifth option. And when he's hitting threes at a high rate, okay, that's like, and he defends, he always defends at a pretty good level. He fits the kind of archetype that the Magic would want on the team. And, um, but but now that they have this, they're looking to improve the offense. I'm not sure that just going after like a guard or a wing that is a good scorer that can create shots, that would be quite enough because of the shot hierarchy. If you're still gonna have Paolo and Franz and Suggs take the most shots, and out of those guys, Suggs has been the best shooter of the bunch. Then when does this guy? How often does he get to score? How much are you really going to boost the offense? I'm actually more concerned about that more so than them losing a couple steps on defense, because I think no matter what, they're going to probably be like a pretty well above average team. But I feel pretty confident they should still be like a top tierish defense, maybe at worst 5 to 10 range. So that's where as I look at this roster, like we can get into the guys they could pursue, but I don't know if that'll be enough just bringing in that guy who can score. They may need to do something a little more. They might have to do a little more. And as I look at maybe, what if they want to do something with big men? Maybe they want to get like a significant upgrade there. I've got a couple ideas what that could look like. But if you can bring in like a legitimate stretch option who can shoot there as well, okay, now you're really, I think, revamping your system in a way that can really boost their offense. So I think I have a bunch of names. We'll go through them. We can just kind of decide how we feel about like their fit and if it's even worth what it would take to go after these guys. But like, what do you think of that theory I just laid out? Where I think it's going to be a little more. I think it's going to be a little more required than just like getting some scores.
Yeah, it's interesting you mentioned the KCP signing. I think when they brought him in, it was interesting to me because, you know, he's not a point guard, obviously. And when they had Markelle Fultz on the roster, he was your starting point guard next to Jalen Suggs. So when they didn't bring back Markelle for a number of reasons, and there's still some fans that, and I'm not saying that Markelle's a great person, but he just didn't work for them anymore. But when they moved on from that and made Jalen Suggs their starting point guard and brought in Kentavious Caldwell-Pope, and obviously Jalen only played 35 games, but even those first 5 games of the season, it was interesting because it's such a small sample size. I'm just not sure if Jalen is your point guard of the future, just because of the way he plays. And he said it himself at exit interviews. He's not going to change the way he plays, which, for better or worse, that's the Jalen Suggs experience. That's why he's an all defensive type player. And what he was able to prove the year before was when he is on the court, he is one of the better defenders in the league, earning that second team all defensive when he played 75 games. But he went from 75 games to 35 games. And we talk about expensive players. He's got to be available, and he knows that, obviously. But he's not going to change. He says he's not going to change the way he plays. So if you're going to bring in a guard and Jalen Suggs, in your mind, I'm saying from the team's perspective, is your point guard, well, that means Kentavious Caldwell-Pope has to be willing to come off the bench or be moved himself. Obviously, the second half wouldn't be up to him; it would be up to the team. But to trade your big off-season acquisition would be, I'm not saying it would be fatal, but that's just you want to sign free agents to bring more free agents in the future to show that you can take care of big names like a KCP who's won championships. Like, he chose the Orlando Magic because he sees something in them, the way he saw something in the Lakers and the Nuggets as well, to help them win titles. So, with Kenny, it's one of those things where he was above 39%, 40% of the last 3 straight years in a row, and then he comes to the Magic and shoots 34%. He just had a really challenging year, and a lot of that had to do with who was on the court next to him, finding his shots. Like I said, Paolo played the first 5 games, then he was out 2+ months, and then Franz Wagner goes down, and then Jalen Suggs goes down. Not to mention, Mo Wagner, Wendell Carter missed most of November, so there were a lot of moving pieces. I don't really know if we know what Kentavious Caldwell-Pope looks like with Jalen, Franz, Paolo, and Wendell Carter in that starting five. And I understand there are some fans that go, well, we do. It's not really good. And I get that. But, you talk about internal development. Obviously Kenny is a veteran player and he is who he is at this point in his career. But he had a down year and he needs to figure out his shooting. He said that himself. So, in terms of what they need to actually add, I'm not sure if Jalen Suggs, the way he plays, is your point guard of the future. And if he is, Kentavious Caldwell Pope, if he's going to be on the roster, has to be comfortable moving back to the bench, which maybe he is. I don't know. We didn't ask him that, but maybe at some point we will, depending on what they do with this roster. But you're right. No, it is intriguing because obviously Powell and Franz are your two versatile wings that can do a little bit of everything. And they have Wendell Carter, they have Goga Batas, they are going to get back Mo Wagner coming off the bench. So they have all these centers that do a little bit of everything, but not all of it, right? They have different pieces of the big. So, I think I've talked with other people on the Magic beat. Like, if we feel that the big problem being bigs is more of a future thing. And right now they need, they need a point guard, they need shooting, and how they're going to fit into that will be interesting because right now you do have Jalen Suggs and Kentavious Caldwell Pope, and Kenny said it himself. He needs to shoot better, and Jalen needs to get healthy again.
So you're right about the KCP thing where, yeah, they brought him in as it's one of their biggest free agent signings. I mean, they haven't really been in a situation to have major cap space recently. So on one hand, yeah, it wouldn't be the greatest look to future free agents if they just moved on from now. But at the same time, they're probably not going to have cap space anytime soon now, now that they're paying all these guys. But thankfully, like even though the payroll is adding up, there are ways and they could keep them and have them come off the bench if needed. I mean, it's only a 2-year deal. It's definitely higher. They definitely overpaid him a little bit to get him to steal him from the Nuggets, but in the short run, they could make it work if they need to bring him off the bench. That's not a big deal. And honestly, that's a terrific player to have come off your bench right now.
Right. No, that's not a bad thing. Like, I think that would still be an upgrade from your other bench guard options. If you can bring KCP off the bench instead of Gary Harris at this point in their careers, I think most people are going to be taking Kentavious Caldwell Pope.
Right. So let's kind of get into the finances a little bit because I'm going to explain just kind of quickly why I don't see them going after a very expensive player, even like a max level guy. So first, Paolo, yeah, he's extension eligible this offseason. He's going to get a max, right?
Right. Now he obviously he is. That's super easy.
So
that'll be the first thing that gets reported on that date.
Yeah, I don't think we really need to delve too much more into that. The only main thing is maybe they'll probably give him the provisions where if he gets on BA, he can get a higher max, up to the 30% max.
Right.
I guess the biggest question is, are they going to make it like, oh, if you're third team, then you get the 30%, or maybe they want to put escalators in there. So like third team 27, second team 28, something like that.
Right.
We'll see about that. But either way, he's going to be on a max. Then the other big thing that they have to address is that they have a very high payroll at the moment that's like right up against the second apron, but that's not really as concerning as it might appear because if they'll probably look to see what they could do in the trade market, but at the very least, all they really need to do is decline the team options of a couple guys.
They're not going to be a second apron team. Let's be clear on
that. So if they decline Mo Wagner, his $11 million a team option, which I think they will because of his injury, Gary Harris $7.5 million, I think they'll do that as well. And then Corey Joseph, he's got a team option, which I think they'll probably decline, and then they could bring him back on a just 1-year minimum, which would pay him actually more money, but the Magic spend less due to the 1-year veteran minimum rule. So then you're right under the tax now, which I would expect the Magic are probably not gonna exceed. So after that, now you finally like are in a nice level. I would assume they're gonna bring back Mo on something like just a little cheaper. So whatever trades they're doing, they're probably gonna try to take back equal salary or below. So with Paolo still making just $15 million on the last year of his rookie deal, they could get crazy if they want. If they want to get really aggressive, combine the salaries of like KCP and Isaac and Cole and go after a max guy. They could theoretically do that. I don't think they will though. And that's mainly because they're gonna already have two max guys plus Jalen Suggs making a lot of money. It's a declining contract, but in the short term, it's gonna be very tough. Like some names I've seen people speculate when they do their hypothetical trades are like De'Aaron
Right.
Fox,
Right.
Demontis Sabonis. A big one's LaMelo Ball, which actually I
LaMelo Ball. I
kind of
was gonna say LaMelo
yeah.
is in all of them. I'm like, that doesn't make any sense.
I well, he actually makes a little more sense, I think, than the other two because his max is much lower tier than them. So
Sure.
if the Magic was willing, if they are willing to get into the tax a little bit in the next few years, which I don't think they'd be opposed to it as long as the team proves it's going to be like a top tier contender. I don't know if LaMelo
Right.
does that, but I don't think that. Yeah, so either way, they're not making that move unless they're willing to pay tax and they think that really puts them in that A1 contender tier. Even then, though, I don't see them. I just have a hard time seeing them be that aggressive and trade like the extra draft picks that it would be required to get one of those types of guys. Probably probably might take like if they're not trading their top three guys, I don't really I can't really say like a lot of their guys on rookie deals have like considerably high trade value. So you're gonna probably have to trade like a good amount of picks anyways. For all we know, maybe the Magic want to still hold on to their young guys and see how they pan out. But I would be surprised if they're willing to go like three or even like four picks into the future to bring in a guy like that and pay the premium that's going to come with having such an expensive roster.
Yeah, that you know that even though Jeff Holtman is saying they know they have to swap instead of sign, right? Their free agency is not a, they're gonna have some veteran minimum guys like you mentioned, and they're gonna, you know, all likelihood bring back Mo Wagner, and Corey Joseph showed a lot of what he could do when he's on the court, and he's not, your starting point guard or even your backup, but he's a great spot starter, and he just started in the playoffs for them, which is pretty remarkable when you consider it where he is in his career. But I think you're right in the sense of that, you know, even though they've said they're going to make swaps, just because they're going to say that all of a sudden doesn't mean they're going to, just blow up everything they've been building towards. And I'm not saying they're not going to make moves. Like they literally have said, Jeff Holtman has said they know they have to make moves. Now is the time. Now is the win now mode, right? But like you said, they have Paolo Banchero, they have Franz Wagner, they have Jalen Suggs. Like they're not trying to add or change that right now. What they just need is a little bit more help, and where they can do that is, you mentioned Jonathan Isaacs, you mentioned Kentavious Caldwell Pope. They have some movable contracts, Wendell Carter, Cole Anthony. You mentioned some of these contracts where you know they have two first round picks. That would be really surprising if they use both of them. I would expect them to use one of them just because I feel like it is a cost saving way to add a roster player who's a controlled number at a low number with either 16 or 25. And you can get help through the draft. Maybe we'll dive into that later, but there's help in the draft for them for sure to help some of that. But yeah, no, there's definitely some ways they can get help without having to get a really expensive guy because you look at what the Boston Celtics are about to go through. There's you can't have three. You're not going to have three max players unless you're winning championships, and then I don't see them, being so conservative in the trade market, all of a sudden blowing up all their assets, all their young guys, all their movable contracts just for one guy. Even if that might bring you a championship or put you in legitimate contention, just the way they've moved in the past based on history, that seems pretty unlikely. Um, just based on that alone. But they know they need to make some moves, and there's other like they don't need a max guy. There's other
Yeah.
guys that can at a lower price point that can really help this team thrive because you've done your difficult part. You've gotten Paolo Banchero, you've gotten Franz Wagner, you've got Jalen Suggs, and it's just a matter of putting the right pieces around those. And you have your star players, so just now finding the right role players to put around them to have success.
Yes, and to those viewing, if you're concerned that the Magic are just going to try to completely run it back again, like they can't completely run it back, just because of the roster issues where I'm looking at it right now. If they do those cuts I mentioned, they decline Wagner, Corey Joseph, Gary Harris, but they end up wanting to bring back Corey Joseph and Mo Wagner. They're going to be at 16 players. They're going to have to consolidate a little bit, even if it's not for a high end starter or something like that. Like they have 2 draft picks. I would have imagined they're going to try to move up in the draft. Maybe how can they package 25 and 16? Could you move up like 3-4 spots potentially? They also have like, I think 4 second round picks. So that can help as well. They're going to have to trim some of those. So they're going to have to combine some salaries and just like lower their total, the total available players they have right now. And,
Right.
the rotation players, like a lot of rotation players. So let's get to the fun part because this one, I feel like there's a lot of guys where the Magic, they're in the market for like a scoring. It could be like a scorer who could be a guard, a combo guard, a point guard, a wing. Not a lot of teams are in the market for that. And there's so many players like this. It's like one of the more saturated player types in the league that it's gonna be. I think the Magic are gonna have a lot of options, and they should be able to get someone they like and pretty inexpensively. Um, so I'll throw you a couple names and just kind of tell me what you think of the fit. If that's something if a guy you would like to see. I'll start just with an obvious one. He's been in rumors recently. Anthony Simons, who seems like the most hurry up and kiss already rumor out there. It seems like that might happen. That's been rumored for like a couple of years now. Salary's not too high, makes her like a little bit more than what Contavious Caldwell Pope makes right now. So maybe you can replace his slot there, or you can consolidate a couple guys like Isaac and Cole Anthony to get there. I would, and like a lot of these guys, probably I would imagine are going to cost like a first round pick, maybe 2. But shot 36% from 3, 8.5 attempts. Where do you stand on the Simons rumors?
Yeah, I think he's the fan favorite among the rumors, I guess. I wonder how much of that has to do with him being from Orlando. Like, if he wasn't, let's say he was from Kansas or something like that, like, would there be as much connection? I feel like he's the name where obviously let's be clear, from a basketball perspective, yes, obviously he would help. Yeah, like there's no question about that. But I think he's like the most obvious rumor where like people are just connecting the dots. Well, he's from Orlando, and that's what they need. And I
Yeah.
just think I wonder though, like if that's what they need, and he's from Orlando, and there's a lot of connections, and he came to a playoff game, and he was in the stands, and people saw him. I just think because he's out there already, I just feel like they would have already had him already if they really wanted him. I'm not saying
Hmm.
like again, a
Right.
team people have to remember that like it takes 2 to tango. Obviously, like they can't. This isn't 2K. Teams have to agree to deals. Um, they can't just make trades happen on their own, right? So maybe what Portland's asking for is in Orlando's eyes too much, because otherwise they would have had him already.
Yeah.
I think the contract. I think he's quite a bit of money. Obviously not max or anything like that, but that's a heavy contract, and then you have to re-sign him in a couple of years to a lot more money. So I'm not sure contractually if that makes the most sense. There might be other options out there that you might bring up, but I think for sure
Yeah.
Simons is like, you ask any Magic player who should if you were to poll 100 fans, probably 80 of them would say Anthony Simons makes the most sense, and he does. I think yes, he would bring exactly what they want: offense and shooting, and defensively. We've already said they're willing to give up some defense to get some offense, and they need that at this point because their offense is bottom 5 in all the key categories. So, yeah, it would be a lot of fun to bring him in. I
Yeah.
don't think you need to give up too much in the trade. I just worry about from a contract standpoint in the future, how much he's worth now and what he could be worth in the future, for sure.
So that's a really good point you mentioned. He's on the last year of his deal. I think his salary
Right,
right
that's the
now is going
problem.
to be so his salary right now is at 27. So two things. One, he's going to be extension eligible. what is that number going to come up to? Because his max extension can take him into like the 30s. It'll get pretty high.
That's a lot
Uh,
of money. I mean, that's
I
a lot
don't,
of money
yeah,
when you already have,
yeah,
Paolo and Franz on max, and Jalen's getting a lot of money, and those three
yeah,
in 26, 27 are going to be making total
yes,
120 plus $1 million. So you add another guy making a lot more. I mean, that's four guys, and you're looking at
yeah.
$160 million. So
In
that's
the long
I'm just
run,
saying. I'm not saying
yeah.
like let's be clear from a basketball standpoint. Yes, that'd be awesome, but I'm
So,
not sure
oh,
for the contract what that would entail.
so that's the one thing. Now you also mentioned, what would Portland want? My feeling, and I did the Blazers on Friday. I talked about them. I get the feeling that the Blazers aren't really interested in draft picks or like some of the young some young players. I think they want like what they're going to try to do this summer is consolidate themselves also for like a guy who can potentially be their number one guy. So if there is a Simons trade to Orlando, one, it would probably be a multiple team trade where the Blazers are getting something else for Simons, and maybe Aiden as a bigger salary if needed, and some picks. But then two, I think the Magic and Simons are going to have to figure out what that contract's going to be, because I don't think the Magic are going to be. I don't think right now they would be interested in giving him his max contract. I don't have what that figure is, but it's going to have to be something that they feel fits on their cap sheet in the future. So if they can get all those crossed off, okay, then there could be something that makes sense. So I think it's definitely still worth keeping an eye on. We'll see how
For
that
sure.
plays out. Another guy who's like starter and guard, like combo guard. I like him and I like him more than Anthony Simons would be Kobe White.
Right.
I don't
Right.
think the Bulls are gonna. It's probably gonna take a lot for the Bulls to trade him right now, especially since he's making just like $12 million, something like that. But you can bring him in easily now. But then same kind of question. He's probably going to be looking to make more money than Anthony Simons.
Right.
How does that fit? But just like another guy, I feel like out of everyone I'm gonna mention as far as a guard, I feel like that's kind of like the perfect
I think
fit
Kobe
of like a
White for me
non-max guy.
is yeah, I think Kobe White for me is the top one just because I think defensively a little bit more there, a little bit, I think it fits the identity of the Magic. I think he'd be a really great fit. Yeah, absolutely. And but it just goes
Yeah,
back to that point about the contract in the future. And
yeah,
but again, you have to spend money. You have to give something to get something, right? So, what does Chicago want potentially if he's even available? Um, that's the tricky part. But yeah, I think Kobe White would be a really good fit.
yeah, and
And
probably
would
also
really,
would. Oh, sorry. Probably also would be like
I
a
would just say would
multi-team
really fit the
trade.
identity.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, 6'5", like a lot. Like I was surprised to. I only learned this year he was 6'5". I thought he was, for whatever reason, was smaller than that. So actually could, yeah, I think he could fit the archetype. Probably also would be a multi-team thing. I think like the Bulls are also not really. They never really traded for draft picks. I think they'd want like a guy to replace him. There's a couple comments about this just quickly. So someone's asking about Hero. Two guys are asking about Tyler Hero. I would be surprised if the Heat move him. I feel like they overvalue their guys quite a bit, and um, yeah, I don't, unless they're getting like it's like a bigger trade and they're getting Giannis back or just some other superstar. I just have a hard time seeing Hero be available. Someone touched on the Kobe White extension. Yeah, so his contract is so low that it's probably not viable for an extension. The max would be like 4 for 87. So more likely, if the Bulls or if the Magic acquire him, he'll probably hit unrestricted free agency first, and then then whoever has him has to deal with it from there. And then the last of like these starter types, this one I don't know if you were gonna expect. I don't know if you've ever even considered it. This one I've never heard anyone consider the possibility of the Magic going after this guy. What would you think about Jalen Green?
You're right. I haven't heard that name. I thought you were going to say Derek White. That's
Oh,
interesting.
I mean, the Magic would totally go after Derek White. I didn't
I
even
thought you were going to
consider
say Derek
that.
White because that was a name I've only seen recently among fake trade proposals online that not many people have brought up. I think Jalen Green is an intriguing name. Um, I'm not privy to his
Yeah.
like you said, it's a name I haven't thought much about.
Yeah.
But that would be
I
interesting for sure.
yeah. If the Rockets do end up making some big trade, just a guy. I don't know. I think that's kind of intriguing. I probably would prefer some of these other guys, even Derek White, like you mentioned. Both guys though making already like low 30s. So that is an issue, but just like an interesting
Right.
fit. Now, I would guess if they out of any of these guys, it'd probably be like Simons if they can get him on like a team friendly deal. And then after that, you start to look at more like stopgap guys, like a little bit older, but they're on cost controlled deals.
Right.
And potentially the Magic can, like, if they wanted to, they can get one of these guys we mentioned and an additional guy I'm about to mention, who
Right.
might be, you could probably have him come off the bench if needed. So like Malik Monk, for example, I think that's a guy that we should keep an eye on just because the Kings need a point guard. I would imagine they'll get it done through trading DeRozan. But if Monk is available, that's a guy the Magic they can get without really giving up too much. I'll just kind of go through them quickly. Devin Vassell, a little better than that, probably closer to the first tier of guys. But if the Spurs end up trading him to get Giannis or someone, maybe the
Right.
Magic can get involved, bring him in. I kind of really like that. Uh, there, if he was younger and less expensive, CJ McCollum would be pretty nice off the bench. Yeah.
TJ McConnell too.
I
TJ
just thought
McConnell would also be really nice off the bench.
I just remembered that PJ McCollum or CJ McConnell meme from last year. But
Yeah.
I think McCollum, he would have been a nice guy off the bench if he wasn't making quite as much.
Right.
Norman Powell is the last guy. Yeah, Norman Powell, he's extension eligible. What if he and the Clippers can't agree to something? Another guy the Magic could bring in, he could start or come off the bench. So there's just so many guys. The whole point is there's just so many
Right.
options. They're gonna get someone, maybe even two. Oh, last one, Benedict Mathurin. I get the feeling
Yeah.
that his time might be coming up in Indiana. Could be a pretty nice buy low option for the Magic. So yeah, I mean, I think I don't know, like, where do you settle? Do you think they'll just kind of get one of these guys, or is it possible they get a little more aggressive and maybe have like multiple of these types?
Yeah. I think it's probably just going to be one. And I think, you know, probably some of the earlier names that we mentioned more likely, in my opinion. Um, I'm not sure exactly how, what they view their draft capital, what they're willing to give up with. Like I said earlier, I think they'll use at least one of their draft picks. That just seems like something that would make logical sense from how they value their rookies and kind of viewing their roster on two paths, development and winning, which I think can go hand in hand. But they need to do something, and I think they have enough pieces to go for Kobe White, to go for an Anthony Simons. Um, you know, maybe it sets you up for a different future, but um, they're not gonna. You mentioned the rotational players and whatnot. That it's time for them to make a move, and I would expect something, where they do get multiple players. You know, but at a certain point, they're also going to have, they have to bring back guys on the roster that are, after if they do go after a Simons or a Kobe White, that's where the guys like Corey Joseph come back on a real cheap deal, or Mo Wagner
Yeah,
takes a little bit less, and um, it would be interesting to see who gets moved, how many draft picks. But yeah, I think Anthony Simons or Kobe White, like those, like Kobe White to me is like the perfect one. That just makes the most sense to me. Just
yeah,
given what they like, given who they like. Um, Tyler Hero, you mentioned before. Someone asked about that. Like again, there's so many. Like I don't think unless you're a Magic fan and you watch the Magic, like there's so many guys that would help because the offense is really hard to come by right now. And the fact that Corey Joseph helped the offense towards the end of the season says so much about where that offense is. And that's nothing against Corey Joseph. Like, let me be clear about that. But I'm just saying the fact that someone of his age can help just as much.
Yep.
Yeah, I think it's intriguing. There's a lot of options for sure. Like you said, I mean, you can go on and on about all the different options. But I really think it's probably one proven shooter, one shooting guard, point guardish that could start that they need to help Paolo and Franz and Jalen.
And the reason I think Corey Joseph ended up starting because he's their most traditional point guard out of all the other point guards they had left. So another thing they could do is also just maybe if they don't bring him back, I would guess they bring him back. But if you're gonna get one of these guards I mentioned who could do some secondary playmaking, make up like the point guard in combination with Suggs, and then you don't get like another backup guard. Like let's say you could, what if you could get one of the Jones brothers? That would be like a pretty nice backup. But I don't know. Then maybe they'll just end up getting Corey Joseph back on the minimum, and then you can make enough of a point guard rotation there. But what I'm curious is, they'll probably trade for one of these guards. But let's say, yeah, they do get like a Kobe White, for example, only costs them like one future pick, like not this year's picks, like a future one. And then you can bring in another guy like a Monk or like a Norman Powell, and it just costs you like one of this year's picks. Like if the cost gets that low, I think it's definitely worth exploring. The main thing though is then you're kind of giving up on a lot of your bench guys. Because then that's kind of it for Jet Howard, Caleb Houston, to an extent Cole Anthony. Like if you're doing that, then you're really like that. You're kind of like ending it with the bench. So you're what I'm. So I don't know how much more they believe in some of these guys coming off the bench. That's what I'm most curious to see, because maybe they just get really aggressive and just get like multiple scores and just go with that, and that's kind of the end of their like the last remnants of the rebuild, so to speak.
Yeah, it's definitely possible. I mean, I think you do need to bring in multiple rotational players. Um, I'm not talking you're blowing up the roster, right? They don't need to do that. But you mentioned some of those names there. Three guys that, if they do what they want to do, if they go after some of the players we mentioned, those guys are going to be part of those deals. Because a guy like Jed Howard, you know, I'm not really sure if he fits in Orlando's future, and maybe a fresh start somewhere else would really help him.
Yeah.
Cole Anthony was huge this year. At the same time, he was inconsistent and had his issues and fell out of the rotation at one point. And Caleb Houston had a great month, but it wasn't a great year. It was he was streaky, and you know the right team, the right fit, the right maybe it's a new look for some of those guys. They're serviceable for sure. I mean, Cole Anthony is a fantastic backup point guard. He's accepted that role. He won multiple games for the Magic, but he wasn't playable in the playoffs. And Caleb Houston had a great stretch of the final end of the year. And you could argue he could become eventually what they need, but they need it now, not eventually. Like there's
Yeah.
no more eventually. They need help now, and I think that's kind of what they learned. When guys went down, who can they really rely on? And it's the fact that Gary Harris was able to come back into the rotation says so much about the other rest of the bench and their young pieces.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, there's enough capital, enough pieces to make multiple moves to not just get a starter, but to get a rotational guard as well. And then also add through the draft. I think the draft is an opportunity where, again, you're talking about saving money and cost control in the future. It's huge that they have 2 first-round picks, and they have an intriguing pick swap in 26. That's between Washington and Phoenix and Orlando as well. That I
Yes.
think is really, really intriguing and a little complicated, but I
There
think
is
if
not
the
enough talk
viewers,
about this.
yeah, I don't think there is. I'm not sure. I think maybe the viewers of this podcast understand that stuff, but the average fan might not realize how valuable that 2026 pick swap can be when you really think about where the Wizards are and where the
Yeah.
Phoenix Suns could be.
So I love talking about it. I'm gonna just bring it up real quickly because imagine the standings played out this year. So the Magic have a swap with the Suns. Now the Suns also traded it to like the Wizards, but the Wizards are probably going to be worse than the Suns next year, so you can forget about that conveying. And then, but then also the Grizzlies have a swap with the Suns, but the Magic have the priority. So Magic had the 16th pick, and the Suns finished with 10th. So basically, that would be the swap right there. The Magic would move up to the top 10, and the Suns would drop to 16th. And then let's say the Grizzlies next year are like, I don't know, mid 20s. Now they got to swap with the Suns again. The Suns just go from like, a lottery pick all the way down there. So the Magic have a very, very interesting draft pick, just one specific draft pick in next year's pick. A lot of variability there where that might end up. But like if you're like most teams, a lot of them are bearish on the Suns. That pick alone can get the Magic quite a lot. So at the same time, though, maybe they want to hold on to it, see how high it could go. Do you want to gamble
Right.
on if
Especially in a
seeing?
26 draft that's loaded.
Yeah, like on the other hand, maybe it's worth holding on to it and seeing if it could potentially go up to the top four. Because if the Suns are going to outright miss the playoffs, that's where the Washington stuff would kind of interfere with it being like potentially
Right.
first or second. But like if you're talking about if you want to, there's a case for the Magic taking the risk, holding on to it, and seeing if it jumps into like the top six or top five. Especially because I mentioned earlier, I just don't really expect them to go after like a max player or anything like that. That might make trading that pick worth it. And like based on these names we have mentioned that we see are realistic, might not be totally worth trading that pick for. I don't know. I think that swap's so fascinating.
Yeah, it absolutely is. I mean, I think it was such a when it was done, it wasn't a big deal at all, really. And I don't think a lot of the average fan. I'm not saying the dedicated fans, but the average fan, doesn't pay attention to that type of thing. So it is really intriguing. I think they have
Yeah.
the capital. In the new CBA, you talk about second round picks being so valuable. They have a lot of second round picks in the future. Some of those also swaps as well with different teams. So yeah, I think the fact that they have four picks this year, two firsts and two seconds, plus movable contracts, plus young guys, it should be a really
Yeah.
fun offseason.
Last thing, really quickly, I touched on big men. Last year, it seemed like they were, I don't know how aggressive they were in going after Isaiah Hardenstein, but when I found out that might have been a possibility, I really loved it. And especially seeing how he panned out for the Thunder, I think he would have been an amazing addition as the Magic starting center, just would have fit everything. Like that's exactly who they would probably want to be like their ideal center. There's a lot of big men that could be available, not quite as good fits. Like, Jared Allen's a guy whose name could be out there with if the Cavs want to save some money. Claxton could be available. One other guy that Magic fans will probably be like, oh no, based on how the playoffs went, Kristaps Porzingis just kind of like some overlaps with Hardenstein, where I am sure because the Magic just went at him relentlessly in that Celtics matchup, they're probably thinking, no, no thanks. But he'll probably be available. Like, I'm not saying they're gonna trade him for sure, but like, with their tax situation, he's definitely one of the bigger candidates for him to get moved. So, if he's healthy and moving well, just like excellent fit, helping, it would like just help
Well, I
improve.
think I think you just pointed out why it wouldn't, and that's the health. And
Yeah,
they have so many guys, if healthy, then this, and
yeah.
and you know, I
But
think when we
yeah,
talk about, I think you're right. I think when you talk about this being a championship roster, um, Wendell Carter has proven that he can be really good, but he's bound to miss 20 plus games a year just because of whether it's a foot or a knee or whatever it might be. He just hasn't. I mean, this year he played a lot of games, but he's bound to miss time just because of his history. And they brought back Goga Batase, and maybe Goga talked about the fact that he could have maybe gotten more money elsewhere. And Mo Wagner was on track to be a candidate for six man of the year until he tore his ACL, and he's going to have to come back and earn a contract, next season for the future. But he really likes Orlando as well, and I think Wendell Carter fits just well enough where, I wrote in his season recap his 3-point numbers of just consistently fallen. And I think a lot of it has to do with his body, his knees and his feet specifically. Like his corner threes have just dropped, you know, from 40% to 30s to upper 20s now. And if he can get his shot back and rework his shot, again, you talk about championship roster. I don't know if he's on your winning title team, but I think right now what they want to do, it feels to me as though getting a true center, a championship roster center, that's probably like a move or two away, right? Like that's
Yes.
down the line. That's in the future. I don't know if that's this offseason type of move, but they
Yeah.
have him on an extension, and they got Goga Batase for multiple years, and he's spot starter and he has his flaws, but um, they all do a little bit of everything. Like Mo's so huge. I think fans just look at Mo Wagner as his energy guy, and he's much more than just an energy guy. And Gogo Batase is kind of that rim runner, rim protection. Um, he doesn't shoot. He said he wants to shoot. He wants to work on his shooting. It's just a mental thing. He's doesn't take a lot of threes, and him, when you have a guy on the court with Paolo and Franz, and you're trying to spread the floor, Gogo Batase doesn't really fit well compared to Wendell Carter, who you can stick in the corner, and even if he's not shooting threes, he's at least taking them.
Hmm.
But I think eventually down the line, center is a position where they need to upgrade. I don't think right now, though. If Wendell Carter comes back and has a great year and finds his 3-point shooter again, and Mo Wagner can prove he's 6-man candidate, like that would be huge for them, from a contract standpoint in terms of finding that center. But I think that's like 2 or 3 things ahead. They just need offensive help badly, and I think
Hmm.
right now you have enough at center where the fact that they have 3 really serviceable centers, some teams only have one. I think is they're in a well enough spot where you can have success in the playoffs with those 3. But maybe they have the right deal and maybe they can find something. But I think we talked about before is the priority this offseason at least.
Yeah. No, you convinced me. I think though there is no rush on that, especially because as I get through the type of center, I think they would be the ideal type for this team. Uh, like a Porzingis, Hardenstein type, they're not really available out there. I don't think Miles Turner is going to be available to them either. So might as well just ride it out with their bigs. They're getting enough from the combination of them, and yeah, maybe some guy like that could come up in the future. There was one comment earlier by Mauricio Aguilar asking Wendell Carter Jr. is on a good contract. I don't think he's really expendable. So the interesting thing about Wendell is he signed that extension. It's going to pay him like around 20 million on average, but with the way the cap's going up, if they do end up making that significant upgrade down the line, they can keep him on that contract to be a backup, to come off the bench, still play like 20 plus minutes a game. That'd be like one of the better. That would be like one of the best backup center options. So, just interesting how with Wendell, like you can make a case with the other backup guys, but with Wendell particularly, if they do get an upgrade at center, I do see a world where they can still coexist with Wendell. I don't see why not.
Yeah, no, I would agree with that. I think Wendell has been around enough. He's part of this identity of the team, and
Hmm.
and I think he knows he has to figure out his 3-point shooting. He didn't have a healthy offseason last year. He's able to have a healthy summer this year. He doesn't need surgery. Last season he had the hand surgery that he told me before, that it took longer than he expected, and then he dealt with the knee and the foot again and kind of battled through that this year. I think if he can get healthy and find his 3-point shot again, that would be huge because you're right. You look at the number and his contract extension that they gave him. He can be a really important piece to this team down the line, for sure.
Well, Jason, I think that just about covered everything. Pretty speculative, but that's they're probably going to do something. We could only try to see who fits and what might make sense. But thank you for joining. I had a lot of fun talking about the Magic here. You got anything coming up we should be on the lookout for?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think obviously as we get closer to the draft, going to be doing some draft preview content for sure. The Magic keep things close to the vest. I think if you're not aware of that, but we'll see what happens. But it should be a busy off season. It should
Yeah.
be a fun off season. I think if you're a Magic fan, you look at what they have and how the fact that they won 41 games with what they just went through. This team's really close to being really special. So But yeah, you can follow me at the Real Beede on Twitter and read all my work at orlandosentinel.com.
Yeah, you make a great point. Like the Magic, if I had to guess, whatever they end up doing, whoever they get will probably be someone we'd even touch on. Yeah, because they keep things so close to the vest. Like that Vucevic trade, like it didn't even seem like he was close to getting traded, and the Bulls weren't even like on the radar at the. Like, I was surprised. Definitely one of the most surprising trades of the past 5 years in terms of like who went to where and to where.
Right.
So yeah, no, I'm excited to see what the Magic end up doing. But yeah, like thanks for joining me. Make sure you guys are following him on Twitter and Blue Sky at the Real Beede, and you can check out all his work at the Orlando Sentinel. Make sure to follow me and subscribe to all my platforms at my name, Yossi Goslin. Subscribe to Third Apron. As I mentioned earlier, I'm gonna be getting deeper into the salary cap stuff, so I'll talk about more about Paolo's extension and just kind of like project how their expenses are going to look over the next few years in regards to tax and that type of stuff. And check the link in the description about Sports Business Classroom. There's still some spots available. I'm having a promotional code there for whoever wants to sign up. Yeah, still a couple spots left. So anyone interested in breaking into the industry and taking a chance on that, check the link in the description. I'll see you guys later. I've got a video coming out tomorrow, and then I'll be streaming again on Thursday. I'll see you all then.